Call the redevelopment agency back in. Item B1, direction staff approval of amended restated ballroom facility management agreement between Reno Redevelopment Agency, Downtown Management LLC, and the ongoing operation of the management of the Reno Ballroom. Do we have any questions or any discussion? Mr. Frazee, did you have anything on the item B1 in the redevelopment?
Yeah.
Just the changes that were made, Mr. Mayor, that's reflected in the staff report that allows for the city to be able to use that building free of charge. Also, 12 times a year, plus they basically present everything. This streamlines the process. They present everything during their budget meeting, including what events are currently in the works in their marketing plan. So this would get rid of those provisions where they're having to submit to us every 30 days. So, and also clarifies the naming rights.
Okay.
So
you're going to give me a motion?
move for adoption.
Have a motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Discussion potential direction to agency counsel to hire special counsel and file a lawsuit against Washoe County Treasurer regarding the allocation of property tax to the redevelopment agency.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I do have one comment to make. After consulting with our city attorney, I have used the law firm of one of the law firms here as one of their senior partners a couple times, and may well use him in the future, Mr. Valoria. So on their advice, I recuse myself from this agenda item.
Well, wait a minute now. Now,
Well, I guess I better ask, if I've used one of these law firms in the past, I didn't think that created a conflict.
The use in the past, it will depend how long ago, but the problem with Councilman Guston, he's anticipating a continued relationship. That's the difference.
let me add something now, because I personally, when I was in business, I used one of these firms on a regular basis. My son still, even though I'm not part of his company, he still uses that firm on a regular basis.
Is the company do you have an interest in the company that your son uses a law firm on a regular basis?
Owes me a lot of money. It's about as involved as I want to be.
Who owes you the money?
The company does, and the son does.
Your son does.
My son and that company does.
Do you
That
have an
doesn't-
interest in the company? Do you have a percentage interest or ownership in that company, Mr. Mayor?
To be very honest with you, I don't know. No, I do not in one company, but there's several companies involved, and there's one thing that since we did estate planning, I'm really not sure what I'm involved in. Not that, because I don't go to the office or do anything. I go when I want to go. But yes, I'm probably licensed as a director or something in one of the companies that my son operates.
Okay. The concern is it's going to, unless we can do legal written opinions that actually lowers the quorum for the charter under 6/7 vote is why I'm hesitating. There's going to be a concern there. Mr. Shipman?
This is the Redevelopment Agency Board, so I'm
Oh,
sorry.
thank
Yeah,
you.
so
Thank you. Redevelopment Agency Board has a different hiring. So Mr. Mayor, we just need a quorum of the Redevelopment Agency Board. But if your son's company, which you have an interest in, has a financial relationship with a law firm, then I think you should disclose and abstain as well.
Well, because I just estate planning. I'm a director in a couple of companies, and they're probably non-existent companies that don't do anything, but my son does run the other ones and things. So
I think to be safe, Mr. Mayor, the
I
city
will
attorney
recuse
should-
myself.
Yeah, no, you don't want really to take a chance.
Okay, anybody else have any other comments to make?
That means you're up, Dave.
I walked by all these law firms at one point. I hope that doesn't hurt anything.
Mr. Mayor, just apologies, one other point. Morrison and Peterson, Sue Ellen Fullstone's law firm, between the break, she sent me an email saying that she's respectfully withdrawing. She wanted to convey that she wanted to thank the council for being offered for consideration, but she, at this point in time, she wanted to withdraw her firm's name from consideration, so.
We have the Valoria Ferendorf Law Firm and Lionel Sawyer and Collins. So just 2 firms left.
Okay. How would you guys want to just interview each one of them? Or,
Yeah, I think if they could make a couple-minute presentation on their firm and why they think they're qualified, that would be acceptable.
okay.
Hi, Sean Oliphant for Ferendorf, Gloria Oliphant and Oster. Our firm, under my direction, my department is a civil litigation, commercial litigation department. We have represented county, city, not county interests, but city interests. In the past, we've had the opportunity to work with many of your city attorneys on large public profile cases as well as other smaller cases. And we've always had a good relationship with the city attorney's office. Our firm specializes, or I specialize in the commercial litigation portion. I do not have specific background on tax allocation between governmental entities. I think if that issue had already been litigated, then we probably wouldn't be under the question that we have now. So we've submitted a proposal at the request of the city attorney's office, and I've sent that to each one of you. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions at this time? Okay, thank you very much. There might be some follow-up.
Just real quick, I'm sorry.
Mr. Oliphant?
Yeah. So you would be the lead on this?
I would be.
So who would do the background investigation? Who would be digging into this to
There'd
prepare?
Probably 3 people primarily involved. I would be doing the majority of the work. Some research would be done by Nathan Amman, who has a securities background, and Mr. Millsap, who's an associate of ours. Mr. Amman is a partner in the firm. I would anticipate that I would probably handle 65 to 75% of the work myself.
Okay. So the expertise in this area is there as far as, because you said you haven't dealt with these types of allocations before, obviously, but you figure the expertise is there.
Right. Most of these issues are usually addressed by the Attorney General. The way that we've looked at this is it's a
I
statutory
wish they were addressed
interpretation.
by the Attorney General, because then we'd be done.
Yeah. We've looked at this as a statutory interpretation, which is involved in many different aspects of cases, and the legislative history and the things like that that go behind it are really what's going to drive the case. So I don't, anticipate that we'll have any problems in understanding the issues. We've already received a lot of the documents from Mr. Shipman. I reviewed those the day that he provided them to me, have formulated some ideas already, but the issue is well within our ability for comprehension of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of, Mr. Chairman, members of the Development Board. Dan Reeser with Lionel Sawyer. I'm very certain that we have all of the skill sets necessary for this particular type of litigation. As some of you probably know, Lionel Sawyer has over 70 lawyers statewide, every possible skill set that would be necessary for this type of litigation is available. We have not regularly represented the city of Reno. In fact, haven't had the city of Reno as a client for probably 2 decades. In the interim, though, we have represented every major city and county in the state at one time or another.
Every other major.
Every other major, yeah. And thank you for that clarification, Mr. Eyes. This particular piece of litigation is very much what I do for a living and my practice group does for a living. This involves a declaratory relief action. It involves interpretations of statutes, legislative policy, and the application of, probably looking over the materials that Mr. Shipman sent me, in excess of 25 rules of statutory construction to get to the to get to the result. So I'm certain we can handle it. To the question previously asked, I will be the lead lawyer on the matter. Most likely, the way these matters are staffed in our firm, I would argue any case in court, and I would be the final edit on any materials that were submitted to the court. William McKean, my local and state tax partner, would be the person who would work probably administering the case. And there are about 5 associates, both in the north and the south, that do this type of work, so we can tap really whichever one is necessary to immediately get the work done based on what the timing is, or if it relates to a specific issue that they may have seen previously. I will agree with Mr. Oliphant that this particular subject matter is not a topic of previous litigation, so you're not, this is going to be a question of first impression, which is probably why you have the Attorney General on one side and the county on another side, and they have different political clients that they represent. I'd be happy to answer any questions if I haven't.
Any questions?
And I'm going to ask the same question, Mr. Oliphant. With respect to the potential conflicts, I know you, Dan, that you represent Castaway. Do you see any other potential conflicts or issues where you actually appear before us representing other clients?
In the form of engagement letter that we have prepared and sent to the city attorney, we have addressed the conflict issue, and as I've told Jonathan Shipman, the clauses, the conflict clauses in there are the same clauses that we use with all governmental agencies. So basically, we would not be able to ever take a matter, as long as you're a continuing client, on a substantively related subject, that is tax litigation with the county, but it would not conflict us out from regularly appearing in front of you to represent those who are seeking licenses or approvals or pushing for the adoption of ordinances. And it, in fact, wouldn't prevent us, if you accept our form of engagement letter, because it includes a consent, it would not prohibit us from bringing a action against the city for declaratory relief in a different context if it doesn't relate to this. And that is permissible under the model rules of professional conduct, the more modern version that was adopted by the Supreme Court in 2005. That didn't used to be the rule, that we could have, that you could bring litigation against a current client. So I'm confident that with the conflict waivers in the agreement as we've presented it to you, that we don't have a conflict.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not aware of any conflicts, and I think the conflict provisions he talked about are set forth in our rules of professional conduct. Anyway, we'd be prohibited in representing a party against the city on the same or substantially the same matter. If it is not the same or substantially the same matter, then there would be no conflict.
And then to your other point, do you see this basically as a declaratory relief action? So you'd be basically going before the court, asking the court to interpret the statute. I mean, the AG obviously has already weighed in. We heard Josh Wilson today indicate that it looks like they may have been miscalculating at least the base. I heard the similar thing from the Treasurer's office. They're in the process of trying to work this thing through. So from your perspective, it would be purely a statutory interpretation issue that you would present to the judge?
I think that's primarily where it's at. I think past course of conduct may help explain interpretations of that by the different entities and by the treasurer as well, so that's something we'll need to look into. One thing that I probably should address is throughout the litigation process, there will be opportunities for the parties to make their own decisions by getting together potentially cooperatively and making their own decision rather than having a third party make their decision for them. And that may happen prior to the state court issuing a ruling, or it may happen after that and on appeal. But fortunately, in other cases that we've litigated with governmental entities, we have found times where those entities can get together and make their own decisions because this is something that is not only current but has the potential to really affect everything going forward. So that's why I think it's an important issue, but also maybe an issue that we can get together and try to decide cooperatively.
Then one last question. Can you refresh my recollection? I know you were one of the lead architects when we did the regional settlement. You were representing the Verdi property owners, correct, in that litigation?
I did.
Okay, all right.
And similar to that statute had not been interpreted before. There's no litigation on it before. We didn't have a specific experience with that statute. But I think that we were able to effectively argue that case and prevail.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any further questions? Discussion?
Well, they're both very good law firms, obviously. We've seen how capable Mr. Reeser is when he comes before, the city on a variety of different issues, and so's Mr. Oliphant. I've had a lot of firsthand experience with Mr. Oliphant based on that regional settlement, and I thought he was very persuasive in the arguments that were made as part of the Hardesty, solution that we came up with. So right now I'm kind of leaning to Mr. Oliphant with respect to the city, or I should say the agency, retaining his firm to do the work, particularly since it's going to be a statutory interpretation. I did like your comment also about trying to get this solved sooner than later. I think everybody's kind of would like to see that happen and not have some drawn-out litigation. So those are at least my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments? Councilwoman Sferraza?
More so not on the firm, but for staff on this, because I guess where my hangup is that it's being proposed to take $100,000 out of stabilization. This is really to assist the redevelopment agency. So I guess that's where I would prefer in-house legal counsel to take the initial steps on this, because if it was coming out of RDA, that would be one thing, but it's coming out of the general fund. Not only is it coming out of the general fund, it's coming out of our stabilization account. And so I think that's the issue I'm having. I realize the RDA probably has no money to pay for it, but I don't see why our attorneys can't start the process and ask for that initial ruling instead of going out to independent counsel. And nothing against either one of you, it just comes down to finances for me, why we can't do the initial legwork on this.
John Cadlick, Reno City Attorney. The problem is, once you start, if you decide that you want to go with independent counsel, you're recreating the wheel. They're going to have to go back through everything that you've already done and basically learn everything you've done, so you're paying a second time for that. The second thing is, right now, we just don't have the staff available. As I explained this morning, at the high point of the city attorney's office, there were 36 people there. We're down to 24 and a half. The workload has not changed. The workload is hard. I've been very fortunate to have some very, very dedicated deputy city attorneys who work very hard, and we took, on top of that, took salary cuts to go along with that. And so we just don't have the staffing to do this. I mean, we're going to have to shift some other priorities for other things. So, I mean, that's the problem. And plus, if we're going to start it and get a decision from the court, then the next step after that is going to be an appeal to the Nevada Supreme Court. Why are you going to bring in another counsel to do that? Once you start, you're going to go all the way through this.
Yeah, and I guess realizing that and I don't know who's right or wrong, but I mean, from the interpretation from the Department of Taxation and the AG, I mean, if they're right in their interpretation, then the general fund is going to lose a substantial amount of money because of the allocation, which is going to hurt. So essentially, we're using $100,000 out of the general fund to lose money out of the general fund if we win this case. And I understand what you're saying, Councilman Ayazi, previously before on, no, I mean, this isn't an issue against the assessor or anyone else. It comes down to a legal interpretation. But still, I mean, this has dire consequences for the city of Reno's general fund.
Here's a suggestion, maybe Mr. City Manager, could we do some kind of reimbursement agreement between redevelopment and the city? So if there is a recovery, we could at least pay back the general fund for the attorney's fees that we expended on that case. That to me would be more than fair.
And I would kind of tie into that. My question is, the city has loaned the redevelopment agency funding before. Why would this be considered any different?
Robert Chisel, Finance Director, would have to do is you could set up a loan, but you'd have to, one, disclose how we're going to pay for it. Department of Taxation.
By winning the case. How hard is that?
I agree, but they may have problems with that. Plus, you have not only identify how you're going to pay for it back, but we do have to set up that obligation and go through the debt management, and it's a medium-term obligation is what it would be.
Well, to follow up, is there something that we could, the council could actually do later and say we will repay that without a formal thing?
I'm not sure, and I would look to maybe Jonathan. I would think the council could come back.
You can
at
make
a
an
later
appropriation
date.
to the, you can make an appropriation to the redevelopment agency under, there's a section of 279 that I'm thinking of. In addition, depending upon how the litigation rolls out, I mean, the agency could be in the position to be going after the county for legal fees that we incur. So that's a potential other source of repayment.
Any other questions or comments?
No, just to comment too on what Jessica said. I mean, this is bigger than just the Attorney General's opinion, though. I mean, there's more to this case. I mean, we've also got the how they calculate the distribution of the taxes collected in the redevelopment agency, and no one's ruled on that. I mean, so that's a separate issue that we're going to be going back after those funds also in this. So it's bigger than just the Attorney General's opinion and the District Attorney's opinion. There's that other issue that could be substantial that we're looking at also.
And I would agree, you're talking about the adjustment to the base year, which is what we heard today. And it sounds to me, based on that testimony, that's going to settle out pretty quick, I would think. Then you've got the abatement, and then you've got the 2.7 plus issue. Absolutely. So some of it's going to be ongoing, and some of it might just settle pretty quickly. So if that's the case, then it seems to me the general fund would be reimbursed pretty quickly, or pretty quickly, I would think.
Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the motion consistent with the staff report. We have two firms, actually three, we started three now, only two, that we would retain the Ferendorf law firm consistent with the staff recommendation not to exceed $100,000. Presumably that would be, the city attorney's office is going to assist in that regard, and also if it as we've done with our other counsel, before it exceeds $100,000, you have to come back to us for approval.
I have a motion.
And then to direct staff to come up with some kind of reimbursement mechanism so that redevelopment would, so we can resolve that issue too.
Second.
A motion and second.
And just comment. I mean, two great firms, and I'm glad we have an attorney up here that probably knows you guys better than I do. But I don't know how you pick between the two of you personally. So I'm glad we left it up to Pierre.
Just to. You said staff recommendations. Recommendation one would also authorize the agency to take the steps to file the lawsuit. Was that included in your motion?
Absolutely.
And the last one that we talk about every time, on the staff recommendation, the council would report to the agency counsel, the city attorney's office, and not directly to this board?
It would report directly.
Okay, that's not what the staff recommendation is, so that's why I wanted to be clear.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, consistent with what we had our discussion today, it would report back to the agency. The attorneys
Okay.
would report directly to the agency.
Everyone clear on that? Have a motion and second. Any further discussion?
And I just think that this is what we have an elected city attorney to do. This issue is big enough that I think it should be a priority of the office. I mean, again, it has nothing to do with either one of these law firms. It's just that, to me, it comes down to a financial issue. This may well go above the $100,000, and the redevelopment agency can't pay its own bills now. So I don't know how it's ever going to get paid back, but if this goes all the way to the Supreme Court, it could cost well in excess of $100,000 to fight this case. And I realize it's an important issue, but it should be on the top of the charts for the city attorney's office to go after this, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that, we also have a public works department, but we just let out a contract for $3.6 million for people to upgrade the sewer system, because we don't do that. That's not everything that we do. So we outsource a lot of stuff for a lot of reasons.
And really, the city attorney's office is going to be engaged. It's
Right.
not like they're going to be sitting on the sidelines. I mean, they're going to be actively involved in this case. They're just providing them with a little bit of assistance.
And I think this is a big issue for not us. I mean, honestly, I wish we could get somebody from Sparks. It's going to impact them and all the other cities at one point or another who have redevelopment agencies. It may impact statewide, this decision. And some people might be generating a lot of extra money if we prevail. Okay. Any other discussion? Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-1. It doesn't need a 6/7, correct, for the record, because it's redevelopment agency?
Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. Yes, you are accurate.
Okay. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Okay. Now we have identifications for future agency board meetings. Anyone want something on the agenda? Seeing none, we're on C1, Mr. Mayor. The discussion and potential direction regarding the old regional RTC City Center site. I'm not
Item
sure-
C1, discussion, Mr. Azzi.
I'm not sure if Maureen's,
Ms. McKissick, you got something? We're at 12.
Maureen, just for the record, I met with Ms. McKissick yesterday, and she told me some of the options that we were looking at, and you met with the university today?
Yes, I did. Excuse me.
Well,
I'm sorry. I have a cold. For the record, Maureen McKissick. Yes, we did meet with two representatives from the art department, two people who had been signatories on the letter that you received. And we discussed what they needed and what they wanted. And what they need immediately is exhibit space, and they would like to use space at West Street Market for that. So that was their immediate need, and we're going to be working on that. We said we would do it right away to implement it in January.
Okay. And my conversation with Ms. McKissick was, my interest is getting this, we're told the bowlers are coming in April, to work something out and get that place cleaned up by then. And she brought up a couple other options that they've been working on with historic preservation to do something in one of the buildings. And maybe if we give her another month, she can come back with some of those options in January. Unless, if someone else has another option they want to put forward now, let's get them out on the table for her at this time. But we're still working with UNR. Perhaps the SAVE officers or the bike patrols down there could take one of them over. There's showers in those facilities. And also with the historic Reno groups and HARP, and I believe all those people are looking at one other one.
That's correct. I have a PowerPoint if you would like, but I can do this verbally because I know you've got a 6 o'clock meeting. We have been trying to find ways that we could stand up the site. We've looked at the north building, the south building, and the courtyard, and we have a variety of ideas of how we could move forward. At this point, we are more or less at a standstill into going out into the community and working on it further without council direction on what you would like us to do. The historic preservation groups are interested in doing a heritage center, which is more or less a dynamic, interactive, history-based historic resources center in the south building. And we submitted a grant to the SHPO earlier this month for funding to get equipment in order to do that. I won't know the outcome of that probably until late spring. For the north building, I think UNR would like to work on a gallery potentially. We have some of the law enforcement programs that might want to go in there. We have talked about various other options, including a welcome center, which I know would be probably challenging to stand up, but the location might call for that. So there have been a lot of ideas which have floated up. At this point, we don't have any definite next steps.
Councilman Srazza?
Maureen, can we use, what would be, I think, helpful for the council, what would be eligible CDGB expenses there? And also what would be eligible for the $2 surcharge if we were to use either one of those funds for the RTC site? What would be the eligible uses on either one of those funding sources?
For CDBG, we could not find how to meet any national objective, which is the onus that we have as a city to use that funding.
What about law enforcement, though? If we put SABE or if we put potentially a storefront with PD there?
That would not substantially increase services to low-income people, which is the objective we have to find a nexus to. So I don't believe we can continue to research that, but at first blush, that would not be a match. We thought the most likely source would be the $2 room tax surcharge, which has a nexus to entertainment and tourism in the district. If we could find uses that advance those objectives, then they might be eligible.
Let me go back to CDGB for a moment, though. You're saying that that objective of
Increasing services that benefit low-income people, or people below a certain area median income.
Well, I would say we have the homeless shelter. How far away from that
2 blocks.
facility?
2
I mean, 2 blocks. I'm failing to see how we don't meet, especially in that particular area, how we don't meet the CDGB requirements of putting.
Because the services that would be offered through the former city center buildings would not be directed to those populations. We would not be delivering services on housing, support services from that location. Law enforcement would not be services in themselves to low-income people.
It would be a direct result.
Okay.
But the $2
Mr.
room
Dort?
charge?
Yeah, I think the $2 surcharge could be used, especially if you're looking at like an art gallery or something like that. I mean, clearly, I think that clearly, and it would benefit, the having that cleaned up and having that art gallery or something there as the boulders are coming across there or something like that. I think that's an easy argument to make, I think.
Yep.
The other source that I looked at in particular, was a piece of a former retrack enhancement earmark that had come into the city in 2009. We are still working through the implementation of that, but we could potentially use that for wayfaring and for lighting. And I've met with a consultant who's working on that contract, and she believes that would be a compatible use with the earmark. So that might be, I don't have a number to attach to that, but in terms of being available, yes, it would be.
Yeah, because additional lighting especially I don't know how much that's lit up at night now, but you could, some additional lighting or something like that in there would probably help the chief out a little bit.
We had specifically discussed with her the idea of putting in the white twinkle lights in the tree canopy and keeping them on permanently, having LED lighting that would be very low cost to operate.
Yeah.
Mr. Guston.
Yeah, just very briefly, one other group that has some interest in being down there, but I think their primary interest is at the railroad depot, is a heritage museum, a railroad heritage museum is being talked about. And I don't know if you heard that or not, but Tim Elam has gotten some traction on that. They're moving forward. There may be some nexus too with them. I think they want to be at the depot, but that also, when you talk about tourism, people for bowling coming in, that would be of great interest.
Well, we had thought from the Heritage Center, one of the features would be to offer brochures, teasers to other area interest sites, such as a railroad museum or depot, the Children's Discovery Museum, Nevada Museum of Art, kind of a springboard for those as well. So I mean, I think it could be many things depending on what the council wanted, and we can put together a presentation of what other heritage centers look like. Many communities have them. They're more or less the wave of the future. So there's a lot of best practice out there as to what can go in them.
A good example, if you take a look, Natchez, Mississippi has a visitor center and a heritage museum with a lot of different things there just as you come into town next to the river. It's a good model.
Mm-hmm.
It encompasses all the things you're talking about, Maureen.
Okay, any other, Mr. Ashev?
Just quickly on this issue of the police presence and the CDBG match or nexus, Dwight, are you saying we could use the room tax, that $2 fee for that purpose, or is
No.
it just?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me
It
ask.
it can only be used for capital improvements.
Right.
So what would take the net, what happens if you put a police presence down there and part of their mission would be to basically interface with the families on 4th Street? That's kind of an underserved community. Would that start to get closer to the nexus, or?
It might, yes. In fact, there was a former program which began in the Reno Police Department. We piloted it here. That became the so-called Kids to Seniors Corner, which then went to live with St. Mary's Foundation and is now in transition to another. That would be the kind of program that we could make a solid argument did in fact benefit those populations. But I believe the programs that Reno PD was looking at were the SAVE officers and the bike patrol.
But what we're working on now also is that the Heritage Museum moves into one, and we do put one into an art gallery. Maybe we just have the SAVE officers can be like counter people there, not really have the point there.
Well, maybe
There we
what
go.
staff can do is get together with the police chief and
Correct.
see if there's an option here to see if we can get a CDBG match. That's my only comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other comment? Yes, Mr. Ashev.
So if we come back in a month taking these, the other thing I think the staff has to do is figure out which department's going to sort of own this piece, because we're all still going to have to establish fees to use it. We ran into that before. And who would they have to go through to get permits? Is it the Parks Department? Is it going to be so I think the fee should come up at the same time. It should just be Public Works or Parks Department. How's that going to happen? So I don't want that to be our hiccup at the end.
So the direction I'm hearing is that you want us to come back with a full presentation of how what costs would go into it, how those costs would be borne, what uses could be there, whether we could find some use that would have a nexus enabling us to use CDBGs, and what department this project would be spearheaded through.
Correct.
Okay.
And unfortunately, also a timeline on all. I mean, even if we only did one building up by April, what would we have to do to get those fences down and cleaned
So
up?
is this coming back January the 25th? Is that okay, the second meeting in January?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I was going to ask Maureen, are you going to, what do you need from us today? Because it would be great if we could get this done by April. I'm just worried about some slippage. I mean, do you need some direction from us today on what it is we need?
Well, actually, gathering the thoughts that have been expressed at the dais today, if there's anything more specific than what we've been looking at, you have the memos that we did in November, which lined out the things that we thought might be a fit there. If there are other things you want us to bring forward, that would be helpful now.
How long would it take? I know staff had done some preliminary analysis, let's say the arts or the historical society. How much would it take any work, or can we just flip on the lights and put them in there?
It would take a little bit of work, and we have an estimate of what that would be. We know we have to restore the IT at the site. That's a significant piece of budget. We'd need some cleanup, some painting, tree trimming. We might need to do some minor repairs. The buildings are substantially in good condition, but we would need to spruce up the site.
So the things like painting and the minor repairs, is that something that staff can go ahead and do during the break and get those things ready, get the site prepped?
I think we would need to talk with Public Works and see whether or not that would be feasible. Would you like us, when we come back at the January meeting, would you, in terms of the timeline, for us to address how we can accomplish those tasks in time to have something open by April 14?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Have a motion and have a second with all the inclusion of the comments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Adjournment.
Public comment, Mr. Mayor?
Public comment? Any public comment? No public comment? Have a motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Let's see, now we go back to our agenda. J12. Do an interlocal agreement for fire and culture, future fire services. Any discussion? Excuse me, sir, I didn't mean to interfere. You come right on up.
See what's happening.
You're it.
Oh, okay.
Oh, excuse me.
You've never been that nice
Chief
to me, Mr. Mayor.
Hernandez, very,
For the record, Mike Hernandez, Reno Fire Chief. If it pleases the council, I'd like to combine this with item M2, as the report is basically the same. And if so, I'd like to proceed. This is an update with respect to actions taken by the County Board of Commissioners acting as the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. At yesterday's meeting, City Council took a couple of different actions. Specifically, they directed county staff to move forward with the development of a task force to explore the possibility of regionalization in the upcoming months. They directed the county manager to send out letters of interest to, I think the term was all Northern Nevada emergency responders, interested citizens, and business leaders. Depending on the interest expressed on those letters of interest, that would determine whether they actually do stand up a task force. They'd like to model the task force on their EMS task force that currently is working to examine the EMS issues with the county. The second issue that they acted on was to formally send offers to existing Truckee Meadows employees. We understand those offers will be formally submitted to our employees by the end of late next week. They also directed staff to look at options with respect to auto aid, Station 14, and several staff-related issues, specifically the development of a lateral transfer program to include leave banks, as well as other costs related to existing Truckee Meadows retirees and their benefits. The last item that they discussed was, as the mayor mentioned, was possible action or a possible meeting in February as a consolidated meeting to discuss a variety of issues, including fire service delivery. That was primarily the bulk of the meeting. There wasn't anything of substance that I could bring back and seek direction on. So that was where we are.
any questions? Is there a meeting scheduled for Monday?
As I understand, the JFAB agenda has been posted, and I have not heard from the county whether or not they will have a quorum. We have indicated to the county that we would have a quorum and that we would be in attendance.
Okay. Mr. Hazy.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess one of my questions is going to be sort of, here we go again. They're going to form a task force. They're going to pick who's on the task force. No joint meeting, say, how can we jointly pick a task force to decide how this is going to go? And it just goes back to that email I read. I was looking for it again, where the chairman of the commission said, well, of course, it's going to be our way, or, and yes, it has to be on our terms because we can't afford to do it on anyone else's terms. So I don't know what a task force is going to do. I don't mind participating in a task force if they ever get one going, but it's, again, the whole thing is set up on their terms.
Well, he said it's either his way or the highway, so.
So I don't know how we deal with this. I guess we're getting somewhere. I know a little bit more because the mayor did his press conference today. I really appreciate the comments that they've made and the studies that they made. If some of you weren't at the press conference, they actually had a map that shows how the city is not responding to areas in the north, and this is actually correct. Everything they say on here is correct, but they failed to put in here that as soon as this is over, we will stand up our station to take over their Station 13, so all this orange up here will turn to green. And on this map, they also showed that the Arrow Creek Station is already up and operational. So that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about, that they haven't really been very forthright and honest with the public about what's happening. And we have to talk about all these green areas on the map that they're
liable for.
They're the ones who gave this map, and they said, we understand that we cannot respond to these green areas. And those are the ones we've been saying all along, but they keep insisting that we provide that service for free to them. And that's what we have to get through to everyone, is that we just cannot do that. They can't expect the city of Reno to do that, much less that they haven't responded to. When they respond to Reno, it's still with 3-person crews. When we respond to them, it's 4-person crews. So.
Mr. Ashef?
This thing's a challenge to get on sometimes, but I mean, I know there's ongoing discussions with the county, and I know there's a lot of frustration at this table, but I'm still hopeful that I think it's much more complicated about unwinding this consolidated fire department that we have than anybody ever envisioned. And maybe now that we have a lot more details to this, you know, the big picture and the equation and the things you brought up in the press conference, Mr. Mayor, maybe when we get back to the table with the county, it's going to be more in line with keeping the consolidated fire group and then working out some fair, you know, payment reimbursement with respect to standing up these stations, and maybe at the end of the day improving fire service. Because I don't think at the end of the day, once you break this fire department up, I don't think it's not going to be a useful exercise and provide additional public safety, probably less public safety to a lot of the unincorporated residents. So I'm still hopeful. I mean, I know we talk a lot about this, but I'm still hopeful that we'll come to an agreement with the county.
Well, I'm like you. I'm hopeful that it'll come to an agreement and we'll be able to work things out. But here they've done 2 different studies, and both studies come back saying they can't do what they want to do. We've asked to meet with them. Now they postponed it until February. We're just running out of time with some of these to be able to do things. And I'm hoping that maybe I'll send another letter requesting a meeting for with the council and stuff. I can't imagine me getting a letter from the chairman of the commission asking me for a meeting that I wouldn't contact each of you and see if y'all would have a time to set up a meeting.
But I think we're, at the end of the day, based on and the staff's leadership, I mean, we're going to be ready to go.
That's correct, sir.
We are ready. It's the county has a long ways to go to work out their details, including automatic aid and mutual aid. So, you know, with that eventuality or that facing the county, I think we're going to probably go in a different direction.
Well, I hope so. I offered them olive branch this morning, hoping that they would sit down with us, renegotiate the contract we have right now and extend it for 3 years, and then talk about how to regionalize the fire. I'm hoping that they'll take that message and come back to us.
Mr. Mayor, I was not able to attend the news briefing that you did earlier today, and you probably corrected the numbers, but it was reported yesterday, the responses that the county has made for the city versus the responses that the city made for the county, and those numbers were reversed. Was that clarified?
It wasn't clarified at the press conference, but it was clarified
Yes, ma'am.
the day before when it
Again,
first
for the
came
record,
out.
Mike Hernandez, Fire Chief. As I understand, I read the article online, and there was, they did correct the numbers in terms of responses by each jurisdiction.
Sad part, it doesn't make the newspaper. It's in the obit section.
Yeah.
And my wife's the only one that reads the obit just in case I croak. She wants to know.
Move to accept the report, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to an issue here that I've got to tell you that there's an individual on our council that made this negotiations a hell of a lot easier than I thought it was going to be because he powdered them and buffed them and put them up against the wall and really worked them over. They're just now struggling in here. They're recuperating from my colleague, Mr. Izzy, pounding on them, and we've been negotiating with them on this account. We're passing out a thing here about the Rosewood Golf Course. We've been able to sit and negotiate a deal up to about $7.5 million. We've been able to get them to agree to relocate the clubhouse if the environmental people move them, destroy the clubhouse or do anything they would build or move or do something with the clubhouse. They've agreed to do 3 tunnels, 2 under the southeast connector and 1 under Pembroke. Adding those things up, it all comes out pretty close to $11 million. Mr. Izzy was after $12 million, and I apologize not getting the other million, Mr. Izzy. But I really think, personally, I think this is a good deal for the city. I think it works out well, and it would be something I think we should move forward on. Mr. Dortch.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for staff. I didn't see in the agreement who is responsible for the maintenance. And I thought during one of our public meetings, someone from the RTC said that they're required to maintain that for 15 years. Is that correct?
Jeff Hill, Director of Engineering, RTC. Are you talking about the
Southeast
maintenance of
Connector?
the Gulf? No. We're talking, that discussion was related to the stream restoration, where we would be committed to somehow maintaining that for a period of 10 years, if I'm reading right.
Okay, so nothing on the road itself. There's no maintenance requirement on the road. So once you dedicate that back to us, that's our responsibility.
That's correct.
Is that the same throughout the region? With all the roads that have been built or what?
RTC doesn't
maintain
like snow plowing, sweeping, those types of activities. We would maintain the surface as we do all the other regional roads in the area. We'd come back and overlay it.
So your requirement then would be either stream restoration,
the
wetlands, any of that?
We would. We're looking at developing a endowment fund. It's a core condition. They want to see that wetland area, the stream restoration area, maintained in perpetuity. We put a lump sum of money in that generates interest-bearing account, generates enough to maintain that on an annual basis. We would fund.
So road maintenance is going to fall on us.
Yeah.
Do we have an idea of what that cost is going to be, John? I mean, do you have a rough idea of, how much of that road's in our jurisdiction and what we usually per mile or anything?
I don't have a total number on that. I mean, some things that happen, for instance, we have only so many snow plows, so if that's on a plow route, then we'll have to divert time to go do that, and it'll take away from other areas. It'll certainly be a priority 1 route, so it'll just be a timing factor. We'll have items for striping, to maintain, sweeping, those types of things. So overall cost, I don't have one. If I was to guess, I would say it would be somewhere around about $100,000 a year.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I may, between you and Councilman Ayazi, I think you've done an admirable job. The number you mentioned about the tunnels that you also, I noticed in the agreement, which I just had a chance to scan and look at, that the RTC also agrees to pay for the cost of the design and recognized golf course from the engaged by Reno for the reconfiguration of the remainder holes.
Yes.
And the new holes, the design, they're paying for those 2 also.
Right.
So I think that we're pretty close in terms of numbers. Councilman Azzi was postulating one time at $12 million a year at 11. I think what I would say is I think this is a good agreement, and your check would be recognized. It'd be good to make up the difference if you'd like.
Any question? Mr. Hashef?
Ms. Faraza had her hand up first.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted, Jonathan and I had a chance to talk this morning, and I wanted to make sure we were on the same page, because when I went through the agreement on page, at least on the red line that I got this morning, there was some release language in one of the recitals, which was pretty extensive to me. It talked about Rosewoods generally, and then when you compared that to paragraph, and that to me is kind of the universe of what the city's releasing, and you compared that to really paragraph 4, which I had understood really what we're releasing the RTC from is any property claims. In other words, they're paying us for taking the right-of-way, et cetera. They don't want to be any claims for the bonds. I can see that. But when you look at that recital and then ultimately Section 6, it seems like we're releasing the RTC from virtually all claims that can be made, and that would be included but not limited to the cost and damages. And then Jonathan had a chance to talk to the RTC about this and propose some language to make it clear that if there's design defects or construction problems with the Southeast Connector, which obviously they have control over, they're designing it and building it, that would not preclude us if someone is injured, for example, based on that design, just like any other roadway that we deal with in the state, and the city's named in some kind of a lawsuit because we're taking title to that structure, that we would have protection. We would not be releasing those claims. And then the second part of this is, while they construct the Southeast Connector, they're still responsible for any property damage that would occur, not only in the right-of-way, which is the 20 feet on each side of the freeway or the roadway, but also, I mean, they got to get there one way or another through public right of our property. So that would be something that we could be compensated as well.
Yes, Councilman Hasjeff, I had that direct conversation with the attorney for the RTC, and I think both parties are in total agreement, and if anything, we just maybe need to work on the wording a little bit more. They were totally in agreement with regard to how the liability would flow and everything like that, but if we need to tighten up some of this language, in your opinion, we can definitely take that direction and work on that.
And then within the definition of cost and damages, where you exclude certain things, those are RTC type costs. So for example, for 2i, RTC costs incurred in environmental mitigation, for example, because they're taking responsibility for that. But for whatever reason, if the city was assessed some kind of environmental mitigation claim or whatever, I mean, that would not be released, correct? We would be able to be compensated for that too.
Right, and that was really to get at, as Councilman Dortch had the discussion, things will have the Corps and maybe federal agencies will have conditions on the project that, I mean, we certainly were not waiving those conditions or stepping up and being financially responsible for those conditions.
So are we on the same page in Section 6? Are we really releasing only those items that are defined in cost and damages and really nothing else?
Yeah, I mean, the intent was to do this agreement like the RTC would do any right-of-way acquisition from a private party, So, again, the release has to be broad enough so that, we're not continually going back to them and adding on additional, damage claims. But it has to also be narrowly tailored so that we're not giving away, as you discussed, things, future claims or things that are outside of the scope of the agreement. So RTC, again, with my discussions with Mr. Fowler, we're totally on the same page,
okay.
I think. But, based on your observations, we can definitely go back and, sharpen our pencils on this and take another look, and we can bring it back to you and see if we get to maybe some of these other concerns, modify the recitals.
Because to me, you can clearly interpret this agreement and say we're releasing really any expenses Reno may incur in connection with RTC's use of the SEC right-of-way and construction, and that's pretty broad. So
yeah, and you're right. We want to make that as clear as possible so that we're not arguing a year from now. Yeah.
Okay, that's really all my that's all my concerns, Mr. Mayor.
And I think we should do those things. Yes, Mr.
Can I ask?
Mr. Guston.
Guston,
Yes, Guston. Sorry, Mr.
Thank you, Mayor Cashwell. Mr. Hale, can I ask you a question? The mayor mentioned earlier that the clubhouse, it could be reconstructed. What's the trigger mechanism for the funds being available for the reconstruction of a clubhouse?
Right now, in our preliminary designs, our right-of-way, the limits of our embankment with our easement comes very close to the clubhouse. We don't actually touch it. Part of that reconfiguration of the intersection there with Pembroke requires relocating the driveway. So as we get into final design, we'll have a better idea. Maybe something comes up where we actually impact that clubhouse. We can't build a wall to protect it. There's a problem maybe with the driving range with where the driveway has to be located, and it's it's going to cause problems at the parking lot, we will come along and pay to fix that or adjust it.
Looking at your preliminary design, how close are you now, and what are your tolerances when it comes to that, to determining that, and again, like I say, triggering it?
My guess is I think we're about 50 feet away from the clubhouse.
Currently?
The driveway.
I'm sorry, Jeff, currently?
Yeah. I don't expect anything to come up that's unexpected there. Our alignment is fixed through there because we had to thread our way through some of the wetlands on the course to minimize their impact. So it's set. Yeah, I don't expect it to move. And any point on our curve or our tangents could move that would push part of the road into the clubhouse. I don't expect that it's a big risk. It is a risk. It's not a significant risk.
If it does, is there, again, I apologize if I missed it in the agreement, but is there a number not to exceed?
Not specific to the clubhouse, no.
Okay, thank you.
They did say they would relocate it or rebuild it or do any of that stuff. Ms. Fresno.
Yeah, a few questions, because originally, I believe we were talking about the 7.5, and then the RTC would build the holes. This new agreement, what's actually being included in this? Because it says the RTC shall pay Reno the sum of 7.5, and then in addition, I need to find out what the RTC is being obligated to do in addition to that, under this agreement.
Under the terms of this agreement, we would pay the agreed amount, and then the city, it would be up to the city to manage and administer the construction of the 9 holes.
So that would be on the city's dime?
Yes.
What about the tunnels?
We would do that. That would be a project cost.
And so essentially it's the 7.5, and then the study, you guys are paying for the
design.
Design study?
Yes, that's correct.
So then, I guess a question for staff. If we had our own appraisal done on this piece, Parks, is anyone here from Park staff?
Julie Conway, Parks and Recreation Community Services Director. The piece that is currently where the road's going to go through, we have not had an appraisal done on that.
So we're just relying on the RTC's appraisal?
That is correct. As far as what is being negotiated, that has been negotiated with RTC, correct? We have not done an appraisal on the property.
And then do we have any idea from our end, not RTC's end again, because they have their interests that they're protecting, but from on the city's end, how much it would be to construct the holes? And we really don't know until we go out to bid, but how much is the 9 holes, to relocate the 9 holes and fix the existing ones once the right-of-way goes through?
Yes, Councilor Saraza, what we did as staff was to contact some national firms, including the Golf Course Builders Association of America, which we feel is one of the most reputable ones to look at. And of course, it's what if, this would be arranged because we don't know what the final design is. We think that for 9 holes for what we call the remainder, which is on the site where the road would go through, again, until the design is done, we're not sure, but it would be somewhere between 1.8 to 2 million.
How much?
1.8 to 2 million. We're not sure exactly what that would be, because we haven't done a design yet. It might be less expensive, and what we understand is, as you've heard, that they're going to assist with the undercrossings. So that's what we have estimated based on this particular estimate from the Golf Course Builders of America.
So does that include the costs of redoing the holes, the ones that are going to have to be done on the existing course? Because I understand you have the relocation of the 9, but there's also holes, and that course is in a wetlands, so it makes it much more difficult and more expensive. to reconstruct those other holes that are going to be displaced with the right-of-way alignment.
That estimate that I gave you is for the existing course. You know, that is what we've estimated for the existing course. And again, without a design, we don't know yet, but what we would look at is relocating those holes, most likely some of those holes out of the wetlands, and that will help play, golf play, as well as help us as we go through the permit process. So the estimate I gave you was for the existing golf course where the alignment, the road alignment is going through.
So that includes all the replacement holes
The
and,
nine holes on the existing golf course. Our estimate is 1.8 to 2 million.
okay, so that's what I'm trying to figure out, Julie, and this is why I kind of think we're rushing this thing now. Maybe 7.5 sounds good, but when you look at how much it's going to actually cost to construct the holes, you're talking about the actual 9 holes on the golf course, but then if we relocate the 9 on the separate parcel, what are we talking about as far as cost there?
Well, the total estimate is probably about additional, maybe 2.5 to 3 million to do an additional 9 holes. So I
you're
think
talking
this,
about potentially, and we don't know. Again, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but without an estimate and without appraisals, we could be talking about this much money needed to redo the golf course, which is essentially the right-of-way. Because of the road project, I mean, really, it may not give us enough money to cover the bonds on the existing course and reconstruct the holes for the golf course.
Well,
and so I have a really big concern that we're kind of jumping the gun here on the amount of money without any appraisals. Any other agency, we go out and do appraisals, find out what the actual land cost is worth. We've done it with flood control. I'm sure RTC's done that when they've compensated businesses when they're acquiring right-of-way. And this one is unique because it is in a golf course. And I would like to have those figures before, I mean, this is a big decision we're being asked to make today in accepting this agreement. And I'm not sure that it's going to be enough to compensate in the wetlands and on for the replacement of the new holes.
well, the estimate that we got, we feel fairly comfortable based on the citation of the Golf Course Builders of Association, based on what we have right now, and talking with our pro, with the information we have right now, that it's within range. So that's the information I can give you.
I'm not sure, is it 3.5 or plus the 1.8 on the existing,
It's
Julie?
So total of about 5 million for the total thing, about 5 million.
That's completely contrary to what what's the name of that firm?
Ron Cossier.
The one company gave us a bid of 3.3 million to build 9 new holes.
9 new
and
holes.
760,000 to finish up the 9 holes that are remaining and doing all of that. And they're a very reputable
Well,
group. They're a
I would
very
like to
strong
see
group.
that, Mr. Mayor, because then that's $4 million right there, even with the estimates
And
that
they've
you're
given us
quoting.
$4 million in the offer
So
to
it's
be able to
within-
do that.
It's within range, 4 to 5 million, and that's, that's without a design, and we feel comfortable that would work.
And they're going to pay for the design work.
But let's find out on the appraisal, because then I would like to see those numbers, written numbers of the actual course, the 9 holes, and the relocation of the 9 holes, those 2 numbers combined. And then let's go out and do an appraisal and find out what the land is actually worth. We haven't even done that yet.
Mr. Dort.
I mean, we can go out and do an appraisal, but if you do an appraisal, the appraisal is going to come in a lot lower than what you're looking at. I mean, I think an appraisal on the golf course is going to come in much lower. I mean, I think it's what we're trying to do is get to the point where we're whole at the end of the day. I mean, once this road goes through, we're whole at the end of the day. So we're in the same position we are after this thing as we were before. And I think the mayor's done a pretty good job of negotiating this and getting it to that point. They're not required to overcompensate us. And if we want the appraised amount, it's going to be a lot less. So let's go out and get an appraisal and tell them to pay us the appraised amount. I mean, because it's going to come in a lot lower than what you're looking at. Because you can go buy a golf course today for $2 million. There's probably several of them you could buy.
There's at least 3 in town. And,
So if you want to appraise it, and you want to take appraised value, then I think you're going to let the RTC off of about $5 million. But, I mean, the question is, do you want appraised
The
value?
replacement of the holes, if you
wanna
have the replacement of the holes, Councilman Dorch, and with all due respect, this road is cutting through the middle of a neighborhood.
I understand
Through
what you're
a
saying,
golf
but
course.
my point is, do you want appraised value, or do you want to be whole at the end of the day?
Well, I think we've got to, it's two different things. This is a lump sum. This is a lump sum for the amount of the land. They're saying we're fully compensated on everything for the amount of the land and for the construction of the golf course, which if it weren't for them going through the golf course, it wouldn't need to be reconstructed. So are we being whole? I think that's are we being made whole? I think that's a legitimate question.
Well, I think that Mr. Hazy covered it with him real well when he was negotiating things, and I don't want to speak for him, but because of Mr. Hazy, it made my share of the negotiations a lot more simple because of what he has done. Mr. Hazy.
Let me ask 2 questions, Mr. Mayor, of things that have come up in the last 2 days. Number one, on our RTC agenda on Friday, we have on our agenda to purchase property from Waste Management for the Southeast Connector for $225,000. How many acres is that?
That's 1.72 acres.
So for 2 acres, that's approximately $100,000 an acre. And how much was our appraisal, RTC's appraisal on the 110 acres?
The sewer land, the property?
Correct.
It was 1.67 million. And I have to qualify, if I'm going to throw these numbers out, that the land is much different up there on the corner than it is on the sewer.
And that's what I was going to ask. What's the difference? Why would one be worth 100,000 and one be worth 10,000 an acre?
One is, I'm not an appraiser, but from what I've seen, it's a commercial area, commercial access, very busy, interstate access right there at the corner of Gregg Street and Sparks Boulevard versus a piece of property that is in a floodplain.
Is this going to be at the corner of Southeast Connector and Pembroke?
In Pembroke, that's correct.
Isn't that going to be a pretty big intersection, you think?
It'd be a great place for a golf course.
And then for our attorney, I know you haven't, we just got handed another version. I want to just double check a couple of the provisions in here because I hadn't run it through the attorneys yet.
Yep.
One thing that, the biggest one that I want to make sure is on XII on page 2,
Okay.
where it says, by this agreement, the RTC acquires all rights to construct the Southeast Connector.
Right.
Does that mean we don't do any public hearings or anything to do the approval process?
I had the conversation with John Fowler. You have 2 things on your agenda today. You have this settlement agreement, and you have the POP agreement, essentially. You can't do this agreement without doing the POP agreement. The POP agreement is the approval. That's, so,
I meant the approval through the neighbor. We were told
sorry.
previously that just to have the road through, we had to have a special permit, special use permit, and public hearings and all that stuff on alignment and all that. Do we not have to do that? That the city of Reno has never really approved this alignment? Because I don't know when we've ever actually approved the road. Here they're making the allegation we have approved the road. I don't think we have.
okay.
So have we ever approved the road?
The project has been approved twice before, I believe, and it recites that in the,
But there wasn't an alignment. We proposed at one point, the city of Reno liked the H alignment, the one on the other side of Hidden Valley, not this
Right.
one.
Right.
So that's the only one. I want to make sure, because I thought we had other further public hearings that we had to do before this could happen. And you're saying we don't?
As far as my discussions with Mr. Fowler are concerned, I'm not aware of any, the approval, the formal approval comes with the other agreement that is on your agenda tonight.
Well, if it's already been approved, why do I have to agree to the other one?
The other one is for the project. This is for essentially an acquisition for that project.
And I meant the project. I thought we
Yeah.
had to have more public comment about it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can go back and I don't have an answer for you right now, but that, based upon what I understood, the approval was in that agreement. Now, what this agreement does say is that if there are permits or whatever, the city will work to expedite those permits. So it's not contractually approving any permit or discretionary act that the city council has to do. It says in section,
I mean, nothing, all due respect, but when you say that the RTC attorney says we don't have to have any other permits, I guess I'm asking the Reno attorney, do we need any permits?
Right, and I would probably have to ask,
If I was the RTC, if I sit as the RTC board right now, I'd say, yeah, that's a great deal.
yeah. And and again, I apologize. I would have to get back to you on that. I would have to go back and research that some additional.
Do you, Bill, Mr.
Special
Thomas?
use permit for cuts
Bill
and
Thomas,
fills.
Community Development Director for the record. Typically, roads are part of another development, so that's how you would see them. In other words, part of a subdivision or a project. Now, we have grading thresholds that could be used as a criteria to require an approval. We don't often get, roadway projects independent of development, so usually you see the road alignment in the context of a development. This is a little different. In my past experience, we haven't taken roads per se as an RTC road as a project, but certainly from the standpoint of grading, we could determine that it would require a special use permit. I'm assuming it'll cross those thresholds, so.
Mr. Gibson, you have any answers to Mr. Azzi's?
As far as city, Mr. Lee Gibson, Regional Transportation Commission, as far as any city approvals, I'm not aware of any that have occurred in the past that would have happened before I got here. I do know the RTC has had a number of actions related to this, including the adoption of its Regional Transportation Plan, adoption of its Transportation Improvement Program, and there have been a number of actions taken by the RTC with respect to the alignment, with respect to the core permit, and there have been a number of hearings associated with those activities where we've had public hearings on the project and the alignment as well. And we have public hearings coming forward most likely with respect to the directions we'll receive from the Corps as part of the 404 permit. So I do know that from the perspective of the RTC and our role under how we do business, the action by the RTC to approve this in its regional transportation plan, to apply fuel tax monies to the project, or in our case, bond funds that are being derived from fuel taxes, and then going through the whole interlocal cooperative agreement process, that really, from our perspective, sets the stage for these projects to be funded and constructed, and that's how we've been doing business now for a number of years. So that's my limited history and knowledge of where we are on this project.
And let me ask you one follow-up question, because another thing was brought up here that I didn't think about in all this was RTC is going to have to do significant mitigation on this for cuts and fills and the policies, the ordinances in the city about one bucket in and one bucket out, correct?
Correct.
If we build a golf course, we're going to have the same mitigation issues. So that might, that I didn't see in the appraisal, that might alter the cost. If we bring in the sand they're talking about, that may alter the cost of the golf course if we build it. I'm wondering if we just add that paragraph in there, Mr. Mayor, if we had mitigation costs by bringing in extra dirt. To us, that might be significant. To the total project, it might be minimal.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Ayazi, I think that was the intent, and I'll also defer to you, Mr. Shipman. I believe that was the intent on page 4, the paragraph beginning, notwithstanding the foregoing, double I, RTC cost incurred as a result of mitigation. I think the idea there was we would cover, if the Corps comes along and says, okay, you're doing your golf course and for every 2 buckets you take out, you got to put 3 in, and that's part of that permit process, then I think we cover those costs.
So even the city's ordinance about the 1 bucket in, 1 bucket out, you'd cover that cost that we would have on both 9 holes?
Now that I would have to get our councils to talk mutually about. That's, I'm thinking more back to what the Corps of Engineers, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers would require. Because again, I think you're operating within the affected area of that permit.
So if we just change this to RTC costs incurred as a result of environmental mitigation by federal, state, or local agencies, that would mean the city of Reno would have to follow that, and you'd have to cover those costs also, wouldn't you?
You following that, Council?
Yes.
Those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions right now? Mr. Fraser?
Yeah, one more follow-up for Bill. This would be for you, because right now that property is on open space. So how could you put a major thoroughfare in there without having a public hearing to allow for a road to go through the middle of a golf course without any kind of public hearing on a zone change? I don't think our code allows for the open space designation to allow for a major thoroughfare to cut through open space. I don't think that's allowed under that zoning category.
Well, and I didn't research that question, so I can go do that. But generally speaking, in open space, the only uses that are allowed, other than recreational, are utilities and roadways, because open space is where it is determined to have an environmental constraint or some aesthetic value to the community, which often doesn't necessarily coordinate or coincide with the pattern of the roadway network. Again, I don't know the specifics on this particular case. I can certainly look into it and make sure that whatever process we need for public that's required by our code, they'll be subject to. I just can't tell you for sure right now.
But what happens is, on one hand, when we're dealing with a land use case, our city attorneys have always told us that we can't predispose where we're going to go without a public hearing. Just like tonight, we've got a hearing in 5 minutes on a case. We've got to sit, hear all the facts, and then make a determination whether the zone change is appropriate. Under this section in this agreement, by agreeing to this, essentially we're already predetermining how we're going to, and I believe a zone change is needed for those types of cuts and fills for a major thoroughfare. We would be predisposing a determination without having public input and without having a public hearing on a land use case.
Well, again, this is probably a legal issue, but I don't think you can, by agreement, override what the state law is. So in other words, if there's a discretionary approval that's required, I don't think you can predetermine your position on it, but probably the prudent thing would be to add some wording in there that made it clear that any discretionary approvals that the city has that may come in the future, are not predetermined.
Mr. Gibson, can I ask you one question? Has RTC had meetings out there with neighborhoods and different things?
Absolutely. We meet with neighborhoods on all of our projects. Public involvement is a critical piece of
You've had a lot of them, I think.
Our plans.
There's been, I don't know how many meetings on this item.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion?
Just a follow-up comment, Mr. Mayor. Originally, the agreement had a representation, well, it may be you, I don't know, but to this discretionary approval that there were none, and we represented that fact, and that was taken out. And I understood the reason that was taken out is it wanted to make it very clear that the city of Reno is not giving up its discretionary approvals on the southeast connector.
Correct. The rep was, for the record, John Shipman, the rep was struck, and if you look at section 9, was the language that was put in. Reno will work cooperatively with RTC to assist in coordinating the expeditious processing and consideration of all necessary permits, entitlements, and approvals, if any. So that was, for those very reasons, we didn't want to get into a position where contractually we were contracting around state law or local ordinance. We can include additional language, as Mr. Thomas suggested, that goes the next step, if that's so, if the council would like that. So.
And then I think we addressed earlier that if the city of Reno has assessed any additional costs for environmental mitigation based on what the Corps does, then we're not releasing any of those claims.
I'm sorry, yeah, we're not releasing any condition that the Corps comes back with. That's on their dime, and and we're not releasing any of those claims, yes.
All right.
Any other questions? Mr. Dortch?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I'm ready to make a motion. The only concern I have is how we get Mr. Hascheff's language cleaned up. I mean, we can move forward with this, but I want to make sure we get the language that, so Jonathan might have to help me in crafting this motion.
I think the motion is to approve the agreement pending the changes relating to the scope of the release and the indemnity, and essentially bring that back, and we can have Mr. Hasjeff, or Councilman Hasjeff, review the proposed language. So council for the RTC and the city will work on that and bring that back, and we can clarify that that makes, meets the
Subject to
council.
review by Councilman Haschif.
Subject to
Is that
review.
okay?
Well, I don't know if I want to accept that use burden, but I think what
Or
staff
the city manager.
understands the direction, and just
Yes.
please redistribute the red line to everyone.
Fair enough.
So everybody sees it and they can look at it. Since I had talked to Jonathan this morning and expressed my concerns,
Right.
and I think he agrees with me, it's just a matter of
Yeah,
making
it's just a
sure.
matter of how it gets in there.
Correct.
Right.
And then there's two other point. One point would be Mr. Ayazi's point.
Correct.
If you'd want additional language in there relative to the discretionary permits, we can put that in.
Right.
And was there a third?
I mean, just the language that Dave wanted with regards to mitigation, to add local.
To add local, and let me make sure I understand the intent of that. That's like if we're talking about the golf course, if we need to ship in sand or something like that. So, and that would come to the council in some sort of discretion pursuant to some ordinance at this point. I'm just not familiar with that.
Would it be in the design?
We have an ordinance already,
Okay.
and I don't think that in their appraisal, they talked about in that cost that the appraiser understood that we had that ordinance that could add significantly to the cost.
And he's talking about if you're shipping in additional materials,
Then
which I think is in our ordinance. If you ship in additional materials,
You got to take
you
something
got to
out.
take off-site. Whereas
Right,
a lot of
and-
mitigation can usually be done on-site because you can, if you're moving it from one spot to another, you're not. But this is for additional materials being brought in.
And fair enough, and I was just unclear because would it be the city doing that in the construction of the golf course versus the RTC doing that in the construction of the Southeast Connector, and not knowing how that works, who would be doing that and who would be subject to
golf course is
the,
what I would assume, because they're going to cover everything in construction with the.
right, so I was
Southeast
thinking, I
Connector.
mean, I guess the thought would be is, let me take this language back and get to the point where, so I just don't want to put something in here
And we
that,
could do it on-site, but I think in the course of the entire project, they could do it some other place.
Right.
Fair enough.
Cheaper and easier.
Right.
so with those three changes,
So my
approved.
motion would be to approve this with those three changes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll go ahead and second the motion, Mr. Mayor. I think when you add up the additional costs that the RTC has to pay in addition to the 7.5, which includes the tunnels, the payment of the design, and then the realignment of the existing 9 holes, it's a pretty substantial number. It's 7.5 plus something closer to 10 or 11 million dollars. And then if staff is able to make the changes that we just added to the agreement, that even provides the city with additional protection. So if those unknown contingent costs are incurred, the city would be reimbursed for those. So then it starts to get really close to something I think Councilman Ayazi was pushing for. So I'll go ahead and second the motion on that basis.
Okay, I have a motion and second. Discussion.
Just a
Mr.
comment on, it was discussed in open forum here about the clubhouse. And does that need to be included in the motion, or is that?
That's in the agreement.
It's in the agreement, okay, thank you.
And really, I want to thank Mr. Isaac. You did a hell of a job in negotiating with these people. You made my share of the negotiations a hell of a lot easier than it would have been. And I really appreciate all your work and all your effort, and thank you very much. Any other discussion? I have a motion? Yes.
I do have a comment. I'm sorry, it seems like it's been one of these days for me on these no votes, but I can't support this. I think the prudent thing to do would be to get an appraisal on the property and also know how much it's going to actually cost to reconstruct the holes at the golf course. My other issue, obviously being, this was one of the issues I ran on back in 2000, that I was opposed to this road for this very seat. The RTC is basing their whole model on 2030 projections, and the population growth has changed. They're widening McCarran out there to 6 lanes. I'm just not sure that this project is needed anymore. And it's going to cut right through the middle of a golf course, and I'm just very concerned with the flooding issues. We've gone over this. I mean, it's been 11 years since I've been on the council. There's been numerous public meetings on this. When I was referring to the public meeting, I was saying the actual land use designation on the zone change, I believe, that will be required. But some time ago, too, there was a resolution passed that this route would not be selected by a previous city council. So I just, I'm going to stay consistent on my feelings over the last 10 years on this roadway and just question whether it's needed in the first place.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Azzi?
Just a clarification, because the attorney said he would bring stuff back. I don't know what the motion, he said he would redline it and get back to us with information. What is it, what are we doing? Is it going to come back to us? Is it approved?
Go ahead. I would think that, I mean, I think if we approve it tonight, we go forward with the changes that that we've requested.
We could do it either way, however.
Going to the motioner.
My thought was, as long as Pierre was comfortable with it, because your language I thought was easy, that as long as Pierre was comfortable with moving forward with it, with the changes that he asked for, then we would move forward tonight and be done.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody else has to comment on the changes, then, I mean, anybody at this table can comment on the changes. I'm going to provide my comments, obviously, but if anybody else wants to provide comments back to the city attorney's office, they can do that as well.
But this action tonight we're taking, we would get those changes and get it over to the RTC. I don't know if they have it on their agenda this week or not, but we would get it over there that the council supports us. All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Show the vote 6-1. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize to everybody coming here right now. We've had a long day. We've still got about 5 or 6, 7 items to go, and then we will then go into the public hearing at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, can we take a 5-minute break, Mr. Mayor, before we go to the public hearing, after we finish this
Sure,
agenda?
after we finish this, then we'll take a 5-minute break, then we'll get into the hearing that was scheduled at 6. All right, board and commission appointments?
J14.
Oh, I should start with J14. J14. Yes, sir, or staff, or whatever.
This item, Mr. Mayor, is a continuation of the interlocal cooperative agreement for the street and highway program. I believe last week it was approved, except for the golf course item, which we have $25 million in there for the southeast connector. That included 16 million for right-of-way, 5 for construction, and 4 for design. And the RTC is requesting approval of this.
Now, didn't we approve this last week except for the roadway, and what about Pyramid and McCarran?
The item
rest of it's
was
all approved?
except for the southeast connector monies.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I request that's all we're voting on, since we already voted on the POPs for all the other roads projects, that this is specific to just the southeast connector being included? Because we already took that position last week.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your question, but if this is a 3-way agreement, I've got county approval, City of Sparks approval, and so if the City of Reno were to change one of the terms, it would have to go back and start
I'm
all
not
over.
asking you to change
Okay.
the terms. We've already approved the POPs, all the rest of the road projects. The only thing that's left is the southeast connector. So I'm asking that the vote be solely on the southeast connector, because we voted on all the other road projects last week already. We already approved this
Okay, so then we're approving the southeast connector this evening.
on the POPs, yes.
On the
But you also indicated Pyramid, right? Wasn't Pyramid?
I thought Pyramid was pulled last week for
No.
discussion, was it?
No, it wasn't on there.
Pyramid wasn't on here.
And that was one of my issues, is why are we approving some things and not everything?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, the Pyramid was covered on prior documents.
Mr. Dortch, you want to give me a motion?
Well, just
Excuse me,
quick
I'm
comment, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, because we just had a lengthy discussion about not pre-approving the southeast connector. I mean, it still has to go through the public process here. So I want to make sure that this agreement's clear on that point, and if frankly we have to add additional language and you have to go back, then I'm sorry, you got to go back.
I'm sorry to be repetitive, but several times before we've had southeast connector monies identified in this agreement for preliminary engineering, for
That's
preliminary
okay.
design. And then this is just the next step. This has the right-of-way money. It has a little bit of construction money.
And that's okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the city of Reno has just given up their approval authority over on that roadway.
Not at all,
Okay.
Councilman Hashef.
Okay.
With the way the Southeast Connector has been presented in the past, this is virtually the same meaning. It just the dollar amounts are different. It doesn't authorize, I guess, it's not an endorsement of the city council for the project, I guess is my point.
Okay.
To summarize.
That's what I needed to clarify. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
then on the agreement, it said the Southeast Connectors has been approved by the city of Reno because of these POP agreements. So how do you say that we're not approving it, but then in the agreement we just signed, it says this is exactly why you've already agreed to it because of this?
Councilman Azzi, the POP agreement, as we understand it at RTC, is an authorization document that allows us to commit fuel tax monies. That's all it does. We have other process to go through. We have a core permit we have to do. Obviously, there's outreach and there's working together with city staff and city to get this project done. So we're not trying to slip one by any means. We're just trying to, first and foremost, get right-of-way money so that the golf course purchase agreement can be funded. And
How did we fund the $225,000 we just gave to Waste Management?
that was on last year's POP amendment.
Not from the city of Reno.
It was money that was allocated in the POP agreement, and according to the statute, the ICA authorizes the project, but it's not a financial tool. We don't manage our finances through this.
One last question, Mr. Mayor. We asked the city attorney to talk to Mr. Fowler about what we get to, have you had time to do that yet?
Yes, I mean, I've had a number of conversations with Mr. Fowler, and actually a bunch today in addition to that. So the question that you need answered is?
What does the city of Reno get approval on for the RTC roadways? Because I don't see, because last time we were talking about how do we get money on the Virginia Street Bridge? How do we do some stuff? And I keep hearing that you've already approved this, or you didn't have to approve that one, or.
And my discussions with Mr. Fowler were that the agreement that's in front of you currently, right now, was the predicate, or what needed to be approved to make this whole thing happen, and then to make the settlement agreement happen. That was the conversation, and so this agreement essentially authorizes the fuel tax to make the payments that you need for the.
Right, but what do we get to approval over the RTC? There's $500 million worth of projects on there, and we don't see them here.
Then maybe, again, I can go back and talk to him again.
We can do that some other time.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
George.
I'll move to approve this. I mean, I think we need to get this going. I think we need to get the entire agreement approved so that all three entities have approved the same item, so that we can get these projects started. And I think if we delay them 30 days, then there's a lot of jobs that aren't going to be happening because we drug our feet on this, and I think we really got to get going. So I'm going to move to approve.
A motion, do I have a second?
This is just on the southeast connector, right? Because we already
As
voted
long
on the
as
POPs.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that we can do it that way. I mean, the agreement itself is what has to be approved in whole, I would think. I mean, the technicality of we've approved part of the agreement and now we're approving the other part of the agreement, as long as our legal counsel's okay with that.
And Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. You need approval of the entire
That's what I thought.
agreement. So we would recommend that would be your preferred course of action. If you do choose to split it, there would have to be a sufficient amount of votes from combining both votes of the meeting for an approval of the entire agreement. Because last time, I don't know what the vote count
I think
was.
it was unanimous last time.
Was it unanimous? But if you would have to pass the remainder of the agreement with the majority vote.
Okay.
You still would have approval from the council if you combine both votes.
So, okay, so I can.
Yeah, best course would be one approval from the council, but we can work with the other one.
Okay, you had a motion?
And I will second that. Mr. Hale, I need to ask you one question, not to prolong this, but when you were before us last week, you said that if you didn't get this passed, it would be jobs that you couldn't or projects that you couldn't initiate in 2012, they'd be delayed to 2013, that would be cost jobs. Is that still accurate for what you
That
said
is
last week?
accurate. And I actually went back and checked, and since we do this every year, we present a 2-year program. So we actually had calendar year 12 projects on last year's approved project. There was 3 projects that we didn't have listed on last year's POP that would probably not be able to go forward with, including Terminal Way around the airport there.
Let me just simplify your answer. So this approval is incumbent, getting this approval is incumbent on you getting jobs, getting projects out and getting jobs in 2012. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a motion and second. Further discussion.
I'm going to support the motion because my support is contingent upon what I heard from the RTC today, that it doesn't prohibit or otherwise impair the city's discretionary approvals on the Southeast Connector. That's why we lifted it out last week, went forward with the other projects to bring it back for that purpose. So on that basis, I can support it because we went through a public hearing process about the Southeast Connector, and it's going to have to come back to the city to do that all over again, Mr. Mayor.
Right. All right, any other discussion? Mr. Azzi?
Yeah, I'm not going to support this, Mr. Mayor, only with the fact that I think the worst argument to say you should support it is because then I have to go ask the other 2 people again. When we're the ones who had the biggest problems with this, they should have come to us first and let the other 2 entities. It wouldn't postpone any jobs. It just meant they'd have to go to Sparks in Washoe County next
On the
month.
Southeast
We've already
Connector.
approved all those projects, and I understand that, but I don't like getting blackmailed that you have to do this because it'll be, we don't want Sparks and Washoe County to have to deal with this. And we've been having trouble dealing with them already to a certain point. And all this money that we're adding here is right-of-way acquisition. There's no jobs in here that we're adding. It's right-of-way acquisition. It's not jobs.
Well, that's interesting because that's not what you just said, Mr. Hale, that there are jobs involved, right?
We already
There's
approved it last week.
approximately $30 million in roadway construction in this agreement. The right-of-way that we're acquiring is the $13 million that we have identified for Southeast Connector. We have, there's actually $70 million.
Did we approve those last time?
We approved those last week.
I know all he's got, but then it's up to us. If you guys don't approve everything, even if you don't like it, then we're going to lose all these jobs. I think that's a bogus argument. They could go back to Sparks and Washoe County and say,
I understand your
we
argument
have-
completely, but I'm
right, we
comfortable
can
with the Southeast Connector.
we can just
That's
move
my
on.
issue, is the money we're putting back in is money for the Southeast Connector, which I'm comfortable with. I mean, that's a project I've supported.
you have.
Okay, I have a motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion
No.
carries. No, it's 5-2. All right, item K1, boards and commission appointments, historical resource.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to appoint Charles Reno to the Historic Resources Commission.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimous. Housing Authority.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, need to reappoint Dick Scott, Glenn Taylor, and Lloyd Dietrichson.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Reno City Planning Commission.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is actually your appointment, but I would recommend Buzz Harris.
Okay.
Second.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Ward 2 South Neighborhood Advisory Board.
Reappoint George Jocelyn and Sean Smith.
Second.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Old Northwest, Ward 5.
Forgot the name, Mr. Mayor.
That's all right.
Move to approve Andrew Simpson.
Okay.
Second.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. We just did that one, item K2. They got it in duplicate. Identification of any future agenda items. Mr. Isaac.
Just one, Mr. Mayor, and this actually might be more for the Health Department to Dan, but I'd like the county's going through their budget cuts again in January, and I wanted to bring up that in our interlocal agreement of 1993 with the county, it says that they cannot reduce the budget of the Health Department in the middle of a budget year without requesting that from Reno and Sparks. And I want that to be clear that they shouldn't be going to the Health Department and doing like the animal control and cutting that in the middle of the year without getting our permission.
But, okay. that'll
Okay,
be-
that can be a future agenda, but I'll bring it up because we have a meeting Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
And that's a future agenda item.
Mr.
Any
Mayor,
others?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Mayor. to have staff draft a resolution to the Washoe County Commissioners about supporting senior services and not cutting the senior services programs, which the county intends to do.
Okay. Any others? All right, any liaison reports? Reports from any conferences or professional meetings? Item L4, Ms. Zadrup.
Mr. Mayor, we've had some discussion about this, and it's clear that we have issues here at the City Council on actions that are underway at the District Health Department as it relates to their management, not the Health Department, but Washoe County, as they manage animal control. And I think that this really does need to have citizen involvement and awareness. So I am proposing that we put a task force together that includes a lot of the rescue groups, that includes the Humane Society, SPCA, and other rescue groups, as well as members from the community. I think that we should restrict it to 9 to 11 type of total number of members so that they can actually take some heavy lifting on and pull together all of the background information as it relates to the bond issue that was passed and intent and expectation, and bring forward some recommendations so that we can work hopefully with the county to resolve these issues.
Okay.
So I don't know if we need to tonight, I'm not suggesting that we should this evening, determine how we select or identify, receive applications from individuals who are interested in serving. Maybe staff should just give us a recommendation back on how we should.
Have staff do that, okay?
Yep.
You want to make that a motion?
That is a motion.
That is a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. L5, Ms. Zadruth, Salvation Army.
From my discretionary funds, move that you should read the resolution.
Resolution number 7655, resolution granting $1,500 to the Salvation Army Children's Service Program to offset costs associated with providing services to children in need.
Move to approve.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. You're taking up a lot of time tonight, Ms. Zadruth. Resolution, Ms. Zadruth.
Resolution number 7656, resolution granting $1,500 to the Salvation Army Senior Services Program to offset costs associated with services provided to seniors in need.
Move to approve.
Have a motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Those are two great causes. Thank you for doing that. Item M1, we're going to pull that and we'll do it later. Item M2.
Did that already, Mr. Mayor.
We've already done M2. Item N1, whoops, wait a minute.
Mr. Mayor?
That's at the public hearing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll
Mr.
go into
Mayor?
recess.
Before we,
Go ahead.
before we go into recess, because I was one of the folks who appealed this case so we could have it at a nightly public hearing, we did get documentation from, I did get a letter from UNR requesting a continuance on this matter. And I know there's two other appellants in this case. I don't know, is Heidi Littenberg here? Heidi and also Mr. Holland. And my preference, being the council person from this area, I have no problem going forward with the public testimony. However, I would like to give time for everyone to meet and be able to go through these issues, because I received 3,828 emails on this particular zoning request, Mr. Mayor, and I think it would be prudent if both sides could sit down and meet, because I think a lot of these issues are in regards to the meat packing facility. I know there's flooding issues as well, but I did get a request from UNR for a continuance on this matter, but I think we need agreement from the other two appellants in this case, if I'm understanding correctly, to
That's-
agree with the continuance.
Right.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
we
Tra-
need to open it up, and then the three appellants can either agree, or they can go ahead and make their presentation tonight, and then we as a council could continue it later to give everybody a chance to get together. Mr. Asham.
I'll let the city attorney go first, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, Tracy Chase, Reno City Attorney's Office. Sorry for the interruption, but you are accurate. That's the advice I was attempting to give to you. You have to open the public hearing to actually get on the record,
Right.
but the other appellant's positions are on the continuance. And then if council is predisposed to continue, you would take public comment on the continuance itself too, because people would have a right to comment on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but one clarification. What I thought I heard said is that unless the appellants agree to the continuance, we cannot continue it, which is not what I understood. We can hear, the pros and cons of continuing, but the decision to continue remains with us.
Marilyn Craig, Deputy City Attorney. That is correct.
Okay.
Let us recommend to you that you begin the hearing by indicating that UNR has indicated a desire to continue, and let them explain why they had that desire.
take 5.
Then, if in fact you want to hear from the appellants, that would, even if they agree or disagree, you would still have the right to continue it.
Right.
And then if anyone wants to make comment on the continuance, they may do so. But you may also find that they are willing to simply say, okay, as long as it's continued, we don't need to make our comment tonight because we'll have an opportunity at the next hearing.
And we have to declare whether they're grieved or not.
No, you don't have to,
Okay,
no, that's
tonight.
not part of that
Okay.
tonight, yeah.
All right. And Mr. Fraza, I got emails from Texas, Louisiana, Ohio, Alabama.
So did I.
So don't be.
Hey, you guys
don't
did
be
your job.
pounding don't be pounding your chest over there. Huh? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a long day today. We are going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll be back to continue the meeting. Thank y'all very much for your patience.